words hung in the air like poison. You were a mistake, Sera. The biggest mistake I ever made. I stood frozen in the doorway of Damien Cross's office, my hand pressed against my still flat stomach. The man I'd given everything to, my heart, my body, my trust, stared at me with eyes as cold as winter steel. This wasn't the Damien who had whispered promises against my skin just weeks ago. This was the alpha, the billionaire, the man who saw me as nothing more than a problem to be solved. I should have known better than to fall in love with a wolf who ran with the elite. That was 6 months ago. Now I sat in a small cabin nestled deep in the Montana wilderness, watching snow fall softly beyond the window. My hands rested on my swollen belly, feeling the gentle kicks of not one but two tiny lives growing inside me. Twins. His twins. The secret I'd carried across 3 states, running from a man who'd made it perfectly clear I meant nothing to him. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the worn wooden floors. This cabin belonged to my grandmother once before she passed. It was the only place I could think to go when I left New York, when I walked out of that gleaming skyscraper and never looked back. Here, surrounded by ancient pines and endless silence, I could almost forget the life I'd left behind, almost. My name is Sera Mitchell, and I used to be invisible. I grew up in the human world, completely unaware that creatures from legend walked among us. Werewolves, shapeshifters, beings of incredible power hidden behind human faces. I was just a girl from a small town who dreamed of something bigger, something more. When I landed a job as a personal assistant to Damien Cross, CEO of Cross Industries, I thought I'd found my chance. I had no idea what I was walking into. Damien was everything the rumors said he was. Brilliant, ruthless, devastatingly handsome in a way that made it hard to think straight. Dark hair that fell just so across his forehead, eyes that shifted between gray and amber depending on his mood, a presence that commanded every room he entered. I told myself I'd stay professional. I told myself I wouldn't be like all the others who'd fallen for him. I was lying to myself. It started small. Late nights at the office, working on deals worth millions. The brush of his hand against mine as he passed me documents. The way his gaze would linger just a moment too long. I felt it then, that pull between us like an invisible thread drawing me closer. I didn't know it was the mate bond. I didn't even know what that meant. The night everything changed, we were alone in his penthouse. A celebration after closing the biggest deal of his career. Champagne and city lights and the kind of tension that makes the air feel electric. When he kissed me, it was like coming home and falling off a cliff at the same time. Terrifying and perfect and inevitable. You have no idea what you do to me, he'd whispered against my lips. For 3 weeks, I lived in a dream. Secret moments stolen between meetings. His hands on my skin in the darkness. Words I'd never expected to hear from a man like him. He told me I was different. Special. He told me he'd never felt anything like this before. I believed him. Then came the morning I found out I was pregnant. The home test showed positive, then another, then another. I was terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. I practiced what I'd say 100 times before I finally gathered the courage to tell him. I imagined surprise, maybe concern, but ultimately joy. We were mates after all. He'd told me himself, explained what it meant in his world. Mates were forever. I never imagined the coldness in his eyes when I said the words. I'm pregnant, Damien. The silence that followed felt like drowning. He stood up from his desk, turned to face the window, his broad shoulders rigid. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, empty. This can't happen, Sera. What do you mean? I know it's unexpected, but you don't understand. He turned then, and I saw it. The wall he'd built between us, solid and impenetrable. I have responsibilities, obligations. My family expects me to mate within the pack, someone of proper bloodline. Someone who can strengthen our position. You're human. This was never meant to be permanent. Each word was a knife. You said I was your mate. I was wrong. His jaw clenched. The bond I felt, it was temporary. A mistake. You were a mistake, Sera. The biggest mistake I ever made. I don't remember leaving his office. I don't remember the elevator ride down or the walk through the lobby. I just remember running, my vision blurred with tears, my heart shattering into pieces too small to ever put back together. 2 weeks later, I was gone. I'd emptied my savings account, packed what I could fit in my old sedan and driven west. Away from the city, away from him, away from everything that reminded me of the life I'd foolishly thought we'd build together. I didn't tell him I was leaving. I didn't tell him about the second heartbeat the doctor had found at my first appointment. Twins. Two perfect little lives growing inside me, half human and half wolf, children of a man who'd called me a mistake. They would never be mistakes to me. The months passed slowly in Montana. Winter came early and fierce, blanketing the world in white. I spent my days reading, preparing the small nursery in the cabin's second bedroom, talking to my growing babies. I took walks when the weather allowed, feeling them move and kick, wondering if they'd have my brown eyes or their father's amber ones. Wondering if they'd shift like him. Wondering how I'd explain their heritage when they were old enough to ask. I wasn't entirely alone. Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who lived in the nearest town 15 miles away, checked on me weekly. She brought supplies, asked no questions, and somehow seemed to understand I was hiding from something, or someone. "You're strong," she'd say, patting my hand. "Stronger than you know. Those babies are lucky to have you." I wanted to believe her. The loneliness was the hardest part. Not the physical isolation, but the ache of missing someone who'd never really been mine. I'd lie awake at night, hand on my belly, and hate myself for still thinking about him. For wondering if he ever thought about me, for wishing, despite everything, that he could be here to feel his children move beneath my palm. But he'd made his choice, and I'd made mine. The knock came on a Tuesday evening in late February. I was making tea, humming softly to the twins when I heard it. 3 sharp raps against the wooden door. My heart jumped into my throat. No one came out here. Mrs. Chen wasn't due for another 2 days. For a wild moment, I considered not answering, but then it came again, more insistent. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my 8-month pregnant belly and moved to the door. "Who is it?" Silence, then a voice I'd tried so hard to forget. "Sera, it's me. Please open the door, Damien." My hand trembled on the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at me to walk away, to pretend I hadn't heard. But curiosity and something deeper, something I hated myself for feeling, made me turn the lock. He stood on my porch covered in snow, looking nothing like the polished billionaire I'd known. His hair was disheveled, his expensive coat dusted with white, his eyes wild and desperate. When his gaze dropped to my belly, he went completely still. "Sera," he breathed. "You're pregnant." "Yes." I kept my voice steady, though my heart was hammering. "What are you doing here, Damien?" "How did you even find me?" "I've been looking for 6 months." He took a step forward, and I instinctively stepped back. Pain flashed across his face. "Please, I need to talk to you." "I need to explain." "There's nothing to explain. You made everything very clear." "I was an idiot, a coward." His voice cracked. "Sera, please. Just listen. 5 minutes. Then I'll leave if you want me to. I swear." The wind howled around us, and despite everything, I couldn't leave him standing in the cold. I stepped aside, letting him in, but kept my distance as he entered the warm cabin. He looked around the small space, taking in the simple furniture, the fire, the life I'd built without him. When his eyes landed on the partially open door to the nursery, I saw his breath catch. "Twins," I said quietly. "I'm having twins." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "Sera, I'm so sorry." "For everything I said. Everything I did. I was drowning in expectations and fear, and I hurt the only person who ever mattered. You said I was a mistake? I know. And I've regretted those words every second since you left." He moved closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "The truth is, you terrified me. What I felt for you, it was more powerful than anything I'd ever experienced. It made me vulnerable in ways I didn't know how to handle. My family, the pack, they have these rules, these traditions. I thought I had to choose between you and everything I'd ever known. And you chose them. I tried to." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But I couldn't, Sera. I can't. These past 6 months have been hell. Every day without you felt wrong. Incomplete. I rejected pack positions. I walked away from arranged matings. I told my family the truth, that I'd found my true mate and I'd been too much of a fool to see it. To fight for it. I wrapped my arms around myself, protecting not just my heart but the babies I'd do anything to keep safe. Why should I believe you? Why should I risk them?" I placed a hand on my belly. "These are your children, Damien. Children you never wanted." "Children I didn't know about," he corrected gently. If I had known, I would never have let you leave. I would have fought through my fear that very day. He dropped to his knees in front of me, looking up with those amber-gray eyes that had haunted my dreams. I was wrong, Sera. About everything. You're not a mistake. You're my mate. My true mate. The bond I felt wasn't temporary or wrong. It was the most real thing I've ever experienced. And these babies. His voice broke. They're a gift I don't deserve. Tears burned my eyes. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never like this. Never with him on his knees, baring his soul with such raw honesty. I'm scared, I whispered. I'm so scared of believing you again. I know. He reached out, slowly, giving me time to pull away, and gently placed his hand over mine on my belly. The moment his palm touched me, one of the twins kicked hard as if saying hello. His expression transformed, wonder and joy and love all mixed together. I'm scared too, terrified of being a father, of not being good enough for you or them, but I'm more scared of living without you, of my children growing up not knowing how much I love their mother, how much I love them already. Another kick, stronger this time. Then another. Both twins, moving together, as if they recognized their father's touch. They know you, I said softly, tears spilling down my cheeks. Sera. He looked up at me, and in his eyes I saw everything I'd been afraid to hope for. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I have to earn back your trust. But I'm here, and I'm not leaving. Not unless you tell me to. I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you and our children are not mistakes. You're my everything. My pack. My home. My future. The wind rattled the windows, but inside the cabin, everything felt still. Suspended. Like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for my answer. I thought about the past 6 months, the loneliness, the fear, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering if I was strong enough to do this alone. But I'd survived. I'd built a life here, prepared a home for my babies. I'd proven to myself that I didn't need him. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't the question. Maybe the question was whether I wanted him, whether I could forgive him, whether the man kneeling before me, vulnerable and desperate and completely sincere, was worth the risk of believing in us again. I placed my hand over his, feeling our children move beneath our joined palms. It won't be easy, I said finally. Trust isn't rebuilt in a day. Hope blazed in his eyes. I know. And I'm not moving back to New York. I like it here. This is where I want to raise our children. Then this is where we'll stay. And if your family, my family will accept it or they'll lose me. His voice was firm, absolute. You and our twins come first. Always. That's not negotiable. I studied his face, searching for any hint of doubt, any shadow of the coldness I'd seen that terrible day in his office. But all I saw was love. Real, deep, unwavering love. Slowly, carefully, I reached down and touched his face. He leaned into my palm like a man finding water in the desert. Okay, I whispered. Okay. He stood then, pulling me gently into his arms, careful of my belly. When he kissed me, it was different from before. Not desperate or passionate, but tender. A promise. A beginning. I love you, he murmured against my lips. I should have said it that first night. I should have said it every day. I love you, Sera, my mate. My everything. I love you too, I admitted, the words I'd been holding back finally free. Even when I hated you, I loved you. We stood there in the firelight, his arms around me, our babies moving between us. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt complete. The mistake he'd claimed I was had become the truth he couldn't live without. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. But inside, spring had finally come.